When biologists talk about extinction and biodiversity, they commonly say things like, we are living in what is one of the six worst times to be alive, so one of the six worst mass extinctions in the history of Earth. And this may rank very soon as the second worst of all time. This may seem a little foreign to you. So for example, right now I'm looking outside my window and I see animals and trees, and it doesn't look as if things are going extinct. To help establish the proper framework for understanding this, I'd like to make a number of points. First, many of the largest animals whose absence would be most noted, they disappeared long ago. Following the end of the Pleistocene and the retreat of the glaciers from the ice ages, it is thought that of Earth's megafauna, these are animals which weigh more than 100 pounds, more than 2/3 disappeared in the aftermath. These animals would be more vulnerable to extinction in the first place because they tend to have fewer offspring than most mammals and a slower life history. In the more than 200 million years of mammalian history, there is not a loss of large mammals comparable to this. While there were probably multiple causes for individual species to become extinct, and the changing climate with the retreat of the glaciers would certainly have been evolved, human overhunting certainly seems to be one of the primary reasons for the loss of the megafauna. When humans spread throughout the world, large animals died in large part because humans, with their advanced brains, their tool making, their group hunting, were so good at hunting large animals. It is certainly known that species have become extinct in historical times. So for example, there are a number of organizations which have attempted to make lists of species known to have become extinct, say since the year 1500, and those lists often approach 1,000 species. Now that's horrible, but I think a number of people would respond by 1,000, doesn't necessarily seem like one of the worst mass extinctions of all time. Clearly it is ongoing. About 160 species are thought to have become extinct in the last decade. But is this actually a mass extinction? Well, one of the responses would be, as you can see in these images from species which are known to have become extinct since 1500 or so. These are larger animals, typically mammals and birds. It's only been recently that we've been paying more attention to some of the smaller species that make up the great majority of Earth's biodiversity. And the overwhelming majority of species haven't been sampled. And so a lot of species simply aren't on our radar and disappear before they are even identified in many cases. Even though mammals and birds, particularly the large ones, figure into our idea of the diversity of life on Earth most prominently, you can see here by this graph that wild birds and mammals are really quite small when it comes to Earth's biomass. One can see that insects, plants, fish, and other animals, mostly invertebrates, make up the vast majority of life on Earth by weight. The same is true of the number of species. Actually, out of all of the species which have yet been identified, 4 groups of insects, the order of beetles, the order of butterflies and moths, the order of wasps, bees, and ants, and the order of flies, these 4 orders of insects comprise more than half of all known species. And so when we look at the lists of things which have become extinct, obviously our lists are biased, focusing on large animals, particularly large mammals and birds, and therefore the vast majority of life is not well represented in our studies.